Hello, everyone, and welcome to Queer Rights in Cuba, What We Can Learn from the Family Referendum of 2022. My name is Angel Castillo. I am going to be the moderator of this panel discussion where we discuss the landscape of struggles for queer legal rights both in the United States and in Cuba. I have been a member of the Democratic Socialists of America since 2017, and I'm currently a co-lead for the Oklahoma City chapter's Queer Liberation Working Group. And so I would like to first thank my comrades both in the Oklahoma City chapter and also in the DSA International Committee, and specifically the Cuba subcommittee, who helped connect with one of our speakers and make this event possible. Why are we doing this event? This event is the result of a lovely confluence of a couple of different factors. First of all, in the United States, it is Pride Month. So, of course, struggles for queer liberation are at the forefront of our mind. And in Oklahoma and a lot of so-called red states, the legal rights of LGBTQ folks are under a very orchestrated and coordinated attack from the political right. So I was thinking, what is a struggle that we can look to for inspiration? And I was thinking about the Cuba Family Law Referendum that got passed in 2022, which is lauded by many as the most progressive reform with regards to recognizing and protecting the rights of non-heterosexual couples in all of Latin America. And as I was thinking about that, DSA National started this campaign of solidarity with Cuba to try and get Cuba removed from the state sponsors of terror list, which it achieved for a few months, and then Trump got elected and put it back on the state sponsors of terror list. So we're back on that struggle. But the ultimate aim is to try and end the embargo. So I thought that this event would be a good way to, number one, educate people in the United States who are not as knowledgeable about what's going on in Cuba, especially, I think, American media tends to present its political enemies as monoliths, and I think it will be a great illumination to talk about how even in socialist countries, struggles for social justice and reform still happen, and how there can still be variations of, there could be various opinions and wings of political struggle, even within a socialist country. And then also, I believe we have some participants who are students of Professor Otero.
I sent them the link, but I haven't seen if they. Yeah, Luis is here.
Excellent.
He's one of my students, and he is very interested in this kind of matters. He also investigates about the rights of the LGBTQ plus community from the law perspective. So I invited him to join us today.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, anybody who doesn't attend live can watch the recording. So this would be a great moment of cultural exchange, I like to think. So enough blabbing from me. I would like to introduce our two panel speakers. I wanted to have somebody who was knowledgeable about the Cuban side of things and knowledgeable about the US side of things, so we could do a compare and contrast and see what we here in the United States struggling for queer liberation can learn and apply to our own situation from the struggle to pass the referendum in Cuba. So first, I would like to introduce our speaker from the Cuban side of things, Professor María del Mar Otero Bolaños. Professor, I'll just let you give a short introduction for yourself.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say thanks to Angel for the opportunity. It is always a pleasure. I'm going to apologize in advance for my English. It's a little bit rusted, but I will try to do my best. I graduated from Havana Law School at the University of Havana in 2019. And since then, I've been a teacher in the same school where I teach, among other subjects, family law. And I have, investigated a little bit from this perspective. Also, I was a part of all the process to approve the 2022 Family Cuban Law, because we were all supporting all the campaign, the communicational efforts to bring knowledge and information about what this law was proposing for Cuban people in family matters. And well, now I continue teaching in this school. I'm also a public notary, and very specifically, I have been investigating in the last few years matters regarding to children rights, and from even also from this perspective, from all the gender perspective, and how they are related also with the protection of children from a gender perspective.
Okay. I will serve to the best of my ability the function of translator when necessary. So if there's something that is better expressed in Spanish, just say it in Spanish, and I'll try to help you out. Also, if during the if there are any folks in the chat who want to put a question in the chat for our Q&A portion, who feel more comfortable writing it in Spanish, I will do my best to translate it. All right, thank you very much for the introduction, Professor. Now, Nicole, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for letting me join you and talk about different rights of LGBTQ across the nation. And it is a real patchwork. So for the past 2.5 years, I worked at the Human Rights Campaign. I'm no longer with them, working on my next project, which, stay tuned, that'll be coming out soon. And so while at the Human Rights Campaign, I did work on several ballot initiatives, including Hawaii, Colorado, and California's push in the 2024 election cycle to codify marriage into those states' constitutions. So should Obergefell fall, gay marriage and also interracial marriage will be protected in states that it is currently banned in their constitutions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So we're going to start first just talking a little bit about the Cuba situation. So Professor Otero, for those of us who might not already know, can you just summarize what is it about this referendum of 2022 that was so progressive and so revolutionary?
Well, we have to begin talking about our Cuban Constitution, who was...
Oh, all right. Reminder for everybody that she is calling from somewhere that is suffering from that is currently undergoing some weather events right now, so that's why there is some lapses in the connection. Let's while Professor Otero figures out the connection situation, let's go ahead and actually start with Nicole. I want to talk in general about sort of the queer rights landscape in the United States, specifically in the context of like the post-Obergefell world. So for those of you who don't know, Obergefell versus Hodges was the Supreme Court case that during the Obama presidency made same-sex marriage legal nationally. So I want to ask you just oh, hello, Professor Otero.
I don't know what happened there. Sorry.
It's okay. We're just gonna we're just gonna talk a little bit. We're gonna switch the order of things. We're gonna talk a little bit about the American situation first, and then we'll move on to talking about Cuba.
Okay, as you want. I'm sorry, okay. The internet is really bad right now.
We will work with your situation as best as we can.
Really sorry.
One of the things, so Nicole, I don't know if this is something that you have a lot of personal experience with, but a question on my mind is, what was the attitude of queer rights activists like immediately post Obergefell? Do you feel like people were just like, well, we got that done, mission accomplished, or was there a sense of like, we need to keep it. There are fights after this, like some yeah, there's a question.
I think there was absolutely a moment of celebration and queer joy. You know, the White House lighting up the rainbow colors, and so there was definitely celebrations, and weddings started happening immediately that night. So there was you know, much to be excited about. But I think for activists, especially that had been doing this for a long time, they knew that the fight was not over. For example, you know, here in Oklahoma, I can speak to specifically, there are questions about parental rights and what that is going to look like over time. There's a court case here pending where we had two female partners who used a sperm donor to have a baby. And then one of the partners during the divorce was actually removed from the birth certificate, the non-gestational partner. And so that court case is going to be coming up. And what will that look like for parental rights? And then very swiftly, because the landscape had changed and Obergefell was in place, what was the next attack? And that's when we started to see the attack on trans youth really start to ramp up. And I want to cautiously say it looks like the pinnacle was 2024. I say that with a lot of caution. The amount of bills that were filed in 2025 did decrease from 2024. Mm-hmm. I would like to see several more years of that trend, of course. I don't want to see any bills targeting trans youth. So there's definitely little places, or not little places, but places that are carved out that haven't really been settled law. Skirmetti decision is going to be coming down from the Supreme Court any day. That will decide some parts of whether or not these bans on trans gender affirming care for minors can proceed. It's not going to decide the law overall. We're not going to get that decision this year, but we have a lot more Supreme Court cases coming up, and there will be more decisions in the future. And we also have to talk about during the Dobbs decision, we did have Supreme Court justices openly talk about Obergefell, but also Loving, and that was the case that allowed for people of different races to marry.
The Dobbs decision was the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, right? Correct. Sorry, I just want to make sure that all of our participants who are not familiar with the United States legal cases know what we're talking about. I want to ask you, just as my experience, it felt like leading up to Obergefell that it felt like there was sort of this hyper focus on marriage equality as being like the issue of the LGBT community in the United States. How do you feel like that focus leading up to Obergefell affected the capacity to engage in other LGBTQ struggles, either during and after?
Well, capacity is a problem. I mean, we are all humans who are only capable of doing so much work a day. And orgs are the same way. They're staffed by humans. So there was a huge push to really focus on marriage. And there still is. We saw that in 2024 with 3 different states, progressive states, go ahead and codify marriage for folks, more equal marriage. We're still seeing that. And for some folks in the community, that can be a little discouraging. Because there are so many needs in the community. We are having issues with parental rights and adoption, and whether or not a parent who is in a marriage and is on a birth certificate sometimes then has to actually legally adopt the child to have rights. So there's so many things that are happening and so many attacks on the LGBTQ community that we really, really have to focus on the overall picture and make sure we're not getting too pigeonholed into just one thing, because again, like you said, folks in Latin America and Cuba are not a monolith. Neither are gay folks or queer folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my questions are always going to be shaped by my experience of the news media and stuff. So it feels from what I've seen and consumed, that like the right's desire to attack Obergefell has not been as strong as it was to attack Roe v. Wade. It feels like there just hasn't, like, once they overturned Roe v. Wade, they sort of focused more on targeting trans people and not so much on gay marriage. And do you feel like there has been a calculated attempt to fracture the LGBTQ community through that kind of like messaging of like, oh, the real problem is trans people, you know, and like if you help us demonize these other people, you know, cisgender gay folks, like, you know, we'll leave you alone. Do you think that that's something that has been happening, whether calculated or not?
I think for some it is absolutely calculated. I think for some maybe it isn't. You know, not everybody's as devious and political as some of us in the movement, but it definitely is. And there is a targeted attack on trans youth specifically. And part of the reason we think that is most people don't know that they know a trans person. But almost everybody can identify a friend who is queer or gay or lesbian or bisexual. So when you know your neighbor's identity, you tend to accept them a lot more. If you think you don't know any trans people, it's very easy to attack them because they're over there and they're removed from you. Also, there's not a whole lot of trans folks. So it's not as if, you know, trans folks can by themselves do a 5 million man march. There's just not enough of them. So we have to protect our trans brothers and sisters through the overall community and make sure that splintering and factioning doesn't happen. And I am so sorry. I have a puppy and he thinks he needs to be part of this conversation.
My cat might join too, so it's okay. So I want to actually talk a little bit about attempts that have been made at the national level to enshrine legal protections for queer folks. Specifically trans folks as well as cisgender gay folks. What's your familiarity with the Equality Act of 2015?
So it is, I've been familiar with it. I've lobbied for it on the Hill. I will say my particular job was specifically state focused. Sure. So I focused on 11 states in the United States. But I do have some familiarity with it.
All right, let me give you a better question. Okay. Yeah. What, given like the political system and the political situation in the United States, do you feel like this state by state approach that you have been engaged in is just a more realistic strategy rather than going for some kind of sweeping national thing? Like we're going to talk about how Cuba, they were able to do this, you know, change to their national constitution. Cuba's a smaller country. Like, what do you think? Do you feel like doing this state by state approach is just more feasible in a country the size of the United States when trying to like guarantee these rights for folks?
I think it's both. I think if you can start at the state level and you can start having these state conversations, because the conversation is going to be different in Oklahoma than it is going to be in California. It's just a fact of life. You have to win the hearts and minds of the people in the middle of the country. If you don't do that, their representatives aren't going to vote for anything at the federal level. So you have to do it both. There has been work that has, organizing that has worked on the national level and worked from the top down, but it's really always been a both and approach. I think that there are conversations that we can have nationally that work very well, but I think talking to our neighbors and talking to our people in the community, talking, on the city council level and the school board level, and that's where a lot of these attacks are actually coming from and being tried out. And so we have to be vigilant at that level as well as the national level. I think it's both. And I know, unfortunately, it's very, very hard to focus on everything that is going on, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's all happening very, very fast and very chaotic. And things are being done that are completely unprecedented. So we're having to wait for courts to intervene, and it's just a hot mess. So it's very hard, but you do need to try and pay attention to what's happening at both levels, because they're very different conversations.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit specifically about Oklahoma, because it's kind of an archetypal red state. And, sometimes it's very easy to just talk about struggles for social justice in the more liberal cities, where it's just easier to have that mainstream media support. What has been, in your experience, like the big challenge for what is the experience of dealing with these you described local based attacks on queer folks and their legal rights? Can you give us some examples of like what you've seen happen in Oklahoma during your time working around these issues?
Oh, absolutely. So we've seen several school boards have to stand up and protect certain books in classrooms. We have a superintendent of education here who I'm sure everybody's probably read an article about at some point, named Ryan Walters, who has really taken MAGA to an extreme I didn't know was possible. He's trying to put Bibles in books. He's trying to remove books. He's made it to where you can't use chosen names, which is wild given our governor uses a chosen name himself. He uses his middle name. Most people don't know that. So there's been attacks at every level. They've tried to ban pride flags. They've tried to ban drag shows. They passed a drag ban, which has virtually no teeth in it. It's been an all-out assault on LGBTQ people in the very vague protect the children, which is just bananas. Ryan Walters actually went after a teacher, removed his license, because he did drag on the weekends. That teacher is now in hiding. They've completely lost their license. Another teacher had to move out of state and is now in hiding as well for simply sharing the Brooklyn Library QR code so everybody could check out books. It has been an all-out assault. And in the legislature, they've been trying to pass as many bills as they can. And those things travel. So while I was at HRC, several of the states when I started didn't have gender affirming care bans. By the time I left, every single red state that I worked in had one, save Kansas. Kansas has a liberal governor and has been able to protect the gender affirming care ban until I left. I believe that is no longer the case, but it has absolutely been assault on LGBTQ folks. And a lot of the most harmful rhetoric is being said at the very local level, and it's very hard for folks.
Yeah. So in your opinion, when we are dealing with, like you said, it's an onslaught of all these different kinds of attacks, and some of them have probably more heavier material consequences, whereas some of them are probably more just fuel for the media, culture war outrage machine. How do we, when we are dealing with all these different attacks from different fronts, what do you think is our rubric for prioritizing where we should focus our energy? Like what kinds of law, like what kinds of bills, what kinds of things, how do we separate what are the distractions and what are the real I use distraction very loosely. I don't think any of it should be outright dismissed, but how do you prioritize it?
So you have to know your sources and who your authors are. For example, we have an author here in Oklahoma who tried to put the entire Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services under the Department of Corrections. That's a distraction. He did that so the media would talk about him, and they did, and it worked. The dangerous bills are the quiet bills. until they suddenly explode because that activists pay attention to them. They're the ones that are done at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're the ones that are what we call bill shucking, which I did not cuss. It's a real word where you actually remove all of the language of a bill after it's already passed a chamber, completely replace it with new language, but those previous votes still stand. So for example, you could have a bill that said, we are going to bring Dolly Parton's Imagination Library to every school in the state. And all the Democrats will vote for it. Most of the Republicans will vote for it because who doesn't love Dolly Parton? They will take all that language and say, oh, by the way, now we're going to put Bibles in schools. That's what the bill says. So then you'll have people who will be like, why did the Democrats vote for that? Because at the time, that's not what they were voting for. So you'll have those shenanigans and things like that. But that's where the danger comes in. Because if you're shucking a bill, you've already had leadership approval. And this bill is going to move very, very quickly. So you want to watch what they're doing that's not getting the attention. Because what they have learned, Alec used to write a lot of the bills, and that's the American Legislative. They're not good folks. I can't remember their full acronym. Maybe if someone could put that in the chat, that would be great. But Alec used to be really prolific in writing all these anti-LGBTQ bills until we defeated all of them in court. Then they had to come up with new language. And they're always coming up with new sinister ways to attack folks.
So when we are, say, engaging in local campaigns, knocking on doors, canvassing, trying to just talk to our neighbors, what have you found works to pierce through American Legislative Exchange Council? Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
When we as organizers are engaging with people in red states who may be sort of poisoned by the right-wing culture war media machine, what have you found works to get people to understand, like, hey, queer people aren't the enemy, like, banning drag nights doesn't like help your kids like get into a good school or put food on your table? Like, what has been your experience as far as like reaching out to people who aren't already like in your camp?
So you probably agree with them on something. And I know people kind of hate to hear that, but you probably do. For example, that crazy bill that I talked about putting the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse under the Department of Corrections. Who agrees with that? Yeah, it's splashy. It makes a lot of media talk, but nobody actually agrees with that. So if you can find common ground, and you can with nearly everybody, because if you remove the buzzwords and the polarized rhetoric, and if you just ask people, should people be able to love who they want? They almost overwhelmingly say yes. But if you say, should Obergefell be overturned, they'll go to their corner and they'll go to the rhetoric. But if you have authentic conversations with folks and you put down the armor, they're not going to get the language 100% right. They're not going to use maybe the terminology you would like. And instead of attacking them or vilifying them or ending the conversation, go, I know that you didn't mean to be harmful with that. Can I explain to you why that is harmful, what you just said? And try and educate them instead of trying to just talk down. People will actually come and talk to you. So I think it's really, really important that we put down the buzzwords, we put down the armor, and we just have real and authentic conversations. It's not going to work on everybody. You have your Marjorie Taylor Greens that are never going to have a real conversation. Don't waste your time with them. But talk to your neighbor. Talk to the person that is bringing you your groceries, or a home health aide, or somebody in your community that you haven't previously talked to, and have a real conversation with them. And I bet if you remove the buzzwords and the rhetoric, you can find common ground.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That is always the challenge of like not letting our political principles just be reduced to aesthetics and team alignments, that we and buzzwords and catchphrases. Because you're right, people are are especially programmed by, you know, the cable news media machine to just break everything down, simplify everything down to catchphrases. It's like people who say like, oh, I thought they were just going to overturn Obamacare, not the American Care Act. So, all right, Professor Otero, if your connection is okay, I would like to go back to just talking about Cuba a little bit. Now we got an idea of what it's like in the U.S. So my question originally was, so going to the Cuba Family Law Referendum of 2022, which was an update to the national constitution of Cuba. Tell us, what was it about this referendum that was so progressive?
I started talking about our constitution because in 2019 we had a first referendum to approve our constitution, and when we were pretending that there was like a first version of the project of constitution that offer a definition of marriage like the legal union between two people, and in like a general way, and it's the way that it's in our constitution today. But at that time, that completely broke off with the idea or our legal regulations regarding to marriage, because our specific law or family law that came from 1975 established that only a man and a woman can get married. So our constitution started settling those principles of equality, diversity, non-discrimination, and that it even ordered that in less than 2 years, our family law was reformed in order to get along with our constitutional values and our constitutional rights. It's important to know that our main law, our constitution, stands for those principles: equality, dignity, non-discrimination, and also from a perspective, to give special protection to those who are in vulnerabilities in front of the law. And in those vulnerabilities, of course, we can identify the LGBTQ plus members of this community, because to exercise all of their rights, they were in a place of vulnerability, because our law, our specific law, in this case, family law, wasn't estandarizada, o no cumplía con esos parámetros. Okay, I don't know how to say that. I'm a little nervous because speaking English is hard for me. Our specific law, our family law, wasn't under that look yet. So it was easy to identify them as vulnerable, because they didn't have that protection from our legal system in the family matters. So in that first moment, when we went to vote for our constitution, it was hard to communicate, to inform, to look for the approval of the majority in order to assimilate this, why this was the most fair way to put this in our legal system. Because even though we have improved in this matter, and the reform in our legal system have, I think, improved. It has educated our population. We still have a very heteronormative society, a very patriarchal society, and we're fighting against that. We are trying to educate, we are trying to communicate. We are from our legal system also try to fight for LGBTQ community members' rights. But it is a fight that even with this constitution, with this family code, we are still struggling because it's really, really important to achieve these changes in our norms, in our law, but we also need to change people's perspective in order, even lawyers, judges, notaries, public servicers need to improve their knowledge and even be much more sensitive in order to be able to change those ideas that are not in order to protect the rights of the people under these principles of equality, of integral protection, of diversity. So that was like a first step. Our constitution that also plays in that high order of law the regulation of a very specific catalog of family rights. For example, the right to structure your family the way you desire, the right to look for all the ways or the possibilities to form your family as you desire, not only protecting the marriage like the only way, for example, to form your family, and all that it was a necessity to translate it to the specific norm. And that's why the Constitution of 2019 established that period of 2 years in order to approve our family law.
Okay. So it sounds like it was, so
yeah?
It seems like it was baked in. One of the differences here I'm seeing between the Cuban and the American situation is that it seems to be there's a lot more participatory democracy baked into the system here, that it's just like approving this new constitution automatically had this period instated to reevaluate all the other like associated laws. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
In order to this referendum process is, I think it's the most democratic one, because all electors in Cuba, we have the right to vote when we turn 16 years old. So every Cuban person over 16 years old had the opportunity to vote for the Constitution and for the family law, not through our representatives in the parliament, but by ourselves, like by our own vote. And that is a very high expression of democracy, I think.
I want to ask, just to change subject slightly. I want to talk a little bit about the process of campaigning for this referendum. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, who were the main groups campaigning for it? Like, who were the obstacles and enemies? Like, what groups within Cuban society were like against this?
Okay. It was a very complicated and hard process because, like I said before, our society, even though it's given really important steps in order to learn about these matters and change the perspective, we still have a very patriarchal society. So we had to make a very hard work to inform, to communicate, to educate, and to look for people's sensibilities in order to understand why this is important to protect everybody's rights. There was a first step. There was, like a period where the family law, or the project at the time was in the process of its writing. In first of it had like the participation of a lot of professionals of different sciences and different perspective. There was in that process of writing the project of norm, there was not only lawyers or people in the law sector, but also psychologists, sociologists, people who were experts in statistics and other science, who were giving their expertise, their specific knowledge, in order to make it the most similar to our society. There was, for example, it was very important the participation of some organizations, for example, la Federación de Mujeres Cubanas, Cubans Women's Federation, and others, like, for example, the National Sexual Education Center. Those two are two very important organizations in our country, who that work a lot all these type of subjects or matters regarding the women's right, the LGBT community, members of the community rights, not only from the investigation exercise, el ejercicio de la investigación, but also in giving some services like legal assistance. So they have like very important information that was translated to the people who were writing this law, and it allowed that let's say those data were incorporated into the institutions that were regulated in the project.
Okay.
After
So it seems,
yeah.
sorry, just to synthesize, it seems like one of the things that there was a cooperative effort from people in, you know, the different sort of scientific fields and professional fields, just to sort of give credence to this referendum and say, like, from an empirical, you know, factual point of view, this is good for everybody. I want to ask about something you said earlier, which is you talked about how you communicated to people that through guaranteeing this, through passing this referendum that guaranteed specific rights for one marginalized group, this was the best way to protect everyone's rights. Can you tell me a little bit more about like some of that messaging, like what kinds of either media campaigns or educational campaigns were done to sort of get that message across? Because I feel like that is something that if we can more effectively communicate to people in the United States, that would be extremely helpful.
It was a very complicated process because, for example, social media was a field where we try to use in our favor in order to inform and communicate, but it was also used against us a lot because, and I was going to talk about that later, the groups that were against the approval of this family law, for example, fundamentalism, religious groups that were fighting really hard against the approbation of the law. For example, also a sector of people with political interests that try to diverse o tergiversar, no sé cómo...
To divert, to
divert,
take attention away from it.
Let's say what was the proposal of this project in order to discredit our government and to attack also that democratic process that was taking place. So it was like a very hard fight in those fields, in those communicational fields, because they were accusing the law project of things like that our government was trying to take the responsibility of the kids, of the parents, things that had no sense at all. but they were sad because they were trying to divert the sense of what we were proposing at the time. And also, like I said, they were misleading people in order to believe things that were not true about the code. But like I said, it was also a good space in order not only to inform and communicate in the most diverse ways. We use, for example, more technical spaces in order to that specialists, law professionals, for example, could explain more technical things about the law, but we will also try to use in our different media other kind of approaches, trying to bring, for example, life stories of families and people that were going to be feeling the benefits of its approval. Because the Cuban family law, it's a law, I like to say, it protects people all along their life in this that family universe, because it protects you when you are a kid in order to because it establishes a sense of the good care that parents have to provide to their kids, because it also has a lot of institutions that are leading to protect children's rights when they have no parents or they have no family. It also protects you in your youth because it gives you the freedom to form, to structure your family the way you want and not the way a law forces you to. We, for example, with this code, assemble or made equal the value of a marriage to a fact union. I don't know if that's the way to say it.
Civil union?
A factable union, recognizing that there are multiple ways that people can develop their love life, their family lives. We also, of course, give the possibility to get married or form and officialize the factical unions to same-sex couples. It was something that must have been approved even from before. Even under the Constitution in 2019, we said that there must have been the possibility to formalize marriages between same-sex couples, but well, it was with the approval of the code that it finally took place. We also, like I said, it gives you the possibility even to establish bonds, legal bonds, like between mothers, fathers, sons, grandpas, in different ways, and not only by the biological bonds. Okay, we also like to say that this is the affection code, because it gives a lot of value to love, to affection, to care, in order to establish, in base of those values, family relationships and also family responsibilities, in order to understand that family is not only formed by a biological bond, but also it can be established for the interaction, for the care, for the love that people have between them.
Excellent.
And yeah.
Sorry, just because we're approaching an hour, I just want to move on a little bit to.
Okay, don't worry.
Okay. No. Thank you so much. So Nicole, I want to come back to you a little bit and say, and ask, what were some things, like, while we were listening to Professor Otero tell us about what was going on in Cuba, what were some things that felt similar to you as far as the struggles? Because I mean, it's easier to say what was different, but like, what are some things that felt familiar or similar to you?
Yeah, so I've actually been struck not by the differences, but actually by the similarities. So when you look at the United States versus Cuba, as far as religion, we're actually pretty close in the number of Christians we have in our population. But what's starkly different about what happened in Cuba versus what is happening in a lot of red states is voter participation. Cuba has an incredibly high voter participation, and in that 22 referendum, it was over 80%. And very few states in the nation touch that. I believe Minnesota, maybe Colorado with the mail-in ballots comes close. But red states, we're seeing much lower voter participation. But also the targeted messages, I think that really works. So for example, if you're talking to your neighbor who maybe has never interacted with a trans person in their life, your message needs to be a little bit different than when you talk to me, who has a trans child and lots of trans folks around them.
Right.
You have to tailor your message. So having those different experts, having the people talk in their own expertise and telling those human stories is really how you win.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me was how the process of Professor Otero, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like part of the process of dealing with this passing this family law referendum is not just getting people to recognize queer people as equally valid humans, but also to sort of rethink the concept of the family itself. We in our local, our book club here in Oklahoma City just finished a couple of months ago reading Frederick Engels' The Origin of the State, the Family, and Private Property. It talks a lot about that. So recommended reading to anybody not familiar with it. But Nicole, do you feel like, has there been a similar, like the family is often used as this conservative boogeyman, that it's like the government wants to tell you how to run your own family. Like that's very much often invoked when talking about, legally enshrining protections for queer rights. They always like to put it as like, this is going to tell you what you're supposed to teach your children, how you're supposed to run your own family. How do we, I'm not going to put the responsibility on you of figuring out a solution, but have you seen people sort of grappling with that idea of rethinking the family more broadly when approaching these struggles for queer rights in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing these in little ways too. For example, some of these book bans are simply banning books of same-sex parent households. And the conversations about, needing to see different families and diversity. And I really like that you all sat down in Cuba and sit down and really had a full-on conversation of what family looks like, because what American families look like in 2025 are not what families looked like in 1985. And they're certainly not what they look like in 1965. And the entire dynamic has shifted. And I also heard the professor talk a lot about the patriarchy and, having to overcome that. And those are the same struggles we're fighting with here. But we absolutely are rethinking family. And you're seeing that in some of the younger generations who are really not talking to their more conservative family members, but are instead creating chosen families and families that look a little bit different. I have friends, lavender marriages are coming back and things like that.
Sorry, can you explain what a lavender marriage means for anybody who's not familiar with that term?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is when it's typically a lesbian woman and a gay guy who are married for financial benefits, gotcha. Insurance, things like that. But they date obviously separately because they're not attracted to each other. So we are seeing some of those where people are realizing, well, I need health care, but I don't have it through my employer and I make too much for Medicaid, which may get cut soon. So what do I do? And what does my family look like? And what does my support system look like? And I love that y'all went back to the drawing board and really had those deep conversations. And by doing that, your voter participation shows that you engaged the community, you had conversations, and looking at the final turnout is very similar margins to the polling we see here in Oklahoma, where over 70% of people feel that gay marriage is perfectly fine. Nobody needs to worry about it. So even though there are stark differences in how we were raised and our cultural differences, the humanity in it all is really the same.
Right. So with that, you're right. A big issue is trying to just get people engaged and get people educated. Like that seems to be the common thread that we see here, that like the best way to get people to support, you know, progressive causes is just getting them educated, you know, demystifying things, and then getting them engaged when it comes to vote for things. For people who are in the United States, who are local organizers, who maybe want to think of like, what's a local campaign that like, you know, we can try and create and engage in that can get people to come out to the ballot box, to do like starting small, starting local. What is your recommendation for people as far as like trying to change the landscape for queer rights locally?
That's a tough one, because if I had all the answers, they would pay me a lot more money and I would have a different
Of course.
It's not a one size fits all.
Sure.
What's going to work in San Francisco is not going to work in Salina, Kansas. They're just not the same thing.
Let's just talk about Oklahoma then.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm seeing and it's kind of an interesting take on parents' rights, which has typically been a conservative talking point. They really believe that parents should be making decisions for their children, though they've kind of lost, you know, the trans children and the gay children and all of that. They've gone completely off message. And so progressives have really pulled that back and said, no, parents have the right to decide for their children. So the new social studies standards have come out, and they include talking about the election of 2020 in ways that are not accurate. And so parents are overwhelmingly opting out of the standards, which was a provision that was put in place for conservatives to stay away from liberal indoctrination, but liberals are turning the tables and removing their children from uber Christian indoctrination. And so we're seeing some of that. But I think one thing you can do is get involved if you have children, get involved in your local school board. If you do not have children and choose to be child-free, get involved in your local city council. Because especially in the post-pandemic era, those city councils and those county commissioners and even the school boards had a lot of money that they were allocating, ARPA funds and stuff like that. And they made a lot of decisions for the community. You can really affect what happens in your town through those efforts. And also pick something you're passionate about. If gay rights is not your jam, that's totally fine. I really got active 10 years ago because there was a tornado in my town and I wanted tornado shelters in schools. Pick something you're passionate about and start working on that, and start working at the local level. That's where you see the most change. That's where you see the most impact. And it's also the easiest change to make.
So then to turn it to back to Professor Otero, what when just hearing us discuss like the situation in the United States, what sticks out to you as far as like challenges that might be similar to what you've encountered?
I think we shared a lot of the challenges. Nicole was just talking about how different the approach has to be in some areas and others. It happens the exact same way here. For example, we can work the same way in rural rural areas and in city areas, because even the demographic situations place you in order to act different. we have a very high task. I don't know how to say. A very
Average,
of
a high
migration
average.
from rural areas to city areas, to metropolitan areas, especially from the young population. So when you go to
A high
rural areas,
rate. Sorry, I
we found
translated incorrectly. When that's a high rate of
a
immigration.
high rate, okay, a high rate of migration. So in rural areas, we have, for example, um, a very high population of people of the third age, and the approach to inform, to communicate all these changes is different to the one you have also with young population, with young people, because as Nicole also said, young generations are a lot of more involved in this new, I don't know, in this way to understand family, understand the freedom in all of the sense of the concept, and that family freedom to relate and to establish those bonds with whoever you want. Uh, I think that the human approach and that approach from the human values and from the sensibility is a very important or a very valuable resource, because when you touch that sense of belonging to something for people, make them understand, well, if the law protects me in my rights as, for example, a third age person, I am seeing the value of it. And I think, well, why is it bad that it also protects the interests and rights of other people who maybe feel, understand things different, but it protects me. It also protects my kids, my grandkids, for for all the decisions that they've really made in the future. And I think that's the sense that we try to spread in order to uh, not always convince, because we don't try to convince people about what they can or not think about others, because you don't have to agree with what I feel or what I think. You just have to respect my right to develop in the way I want, um, only with the limits of not hurting anyone else's rights. So
Right.
that's the spirit, that's the logic. And also, in the similarities that I found, I think we have to keep fighting to educate people, to take these matters to our schools. Even we are in Cuba trying also really hard to improve our sexual education in
Mm.
schools and also in families, in order to teach kids from younger ages that they have first to respect the desires, ideas from anyone, and they have to live in that sense of diversity, that equality, that of respect to others. That is the base of fighting against discrimination, and also to inform them, give them the I don't know, the tools, the ways to proceed in order to protect themselves in their
Mm.
sexual rights, their integrity, their image, their health. And I think that is right now a very important thing that we have to keep going on from our families, from our schools, and we're taking steps in that sense. The family law doesn't of our Cuban family law is a very, very, very important step. I think it gives us like the impulse. I don't know, is that the way to say it?
The
Yeah.
motivation.
yeah, the motivation, yeah, to keep working and to keep improving our legal system in order to protect everybody's rights under these principles. But and also not only our law in the as norms, but also from the development of our operators, of our law operators, in order to establish standards about how you must act beyond your personal or your interior thoughts. This is what is fair, but not only fair. This is what is legal, and you should develop in respect to that. So that's why it's important that in the law we establish those standards, but we also keep pushing the capacitation and the sensibilization about these matters in the professionals that put in practice this law, these norms, but also in the general population in order to make it more effective.
Okay, since we're coming upon 15 minutes left, I just want to say I want to move to the portion where if anybody who is here, I know some people had to leave, but if anybody has any questions for either of our speakers, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can do a little bit of Q&A while we're waiting for some questions to come in. Professor Otero, you mentioned that there's what do you so it seemed like you like what you were getting at was the next challenge after passing this referendum is just more education around the subject of bodily autonomy. Is that correct? Like what is like for people who are progressive reformers in Cuban society, like what is the next challenge after this?
Well, from the law perspective, we are still trying to make our legal system in order with these lines of thought. For example, right now we are very close to present to our parliament the let me translate it, a specific law in order to protect underage people rights, and it's a very integral, integral design of law, and in there we established with very we were trying to be very careful. There is a public version of this project of law that also was put under consultation of the people in general. It was placed on a website of our education ministry, and it was also consulted with underage persons in schools, in all kinds of centers where underage people could give their opinion about this project. So, for example, we there try to be very accurate in the way we establish underage people right to sexual education, to sexual care in the health system. What happens with kids who have, for example, intersexual kids, about the chirurgical operations that are
surgical operations.
Yeah. Exactly. That are take place today in Cuba, maybe in a too young phase of their lives, and how this is harmful for them. So we establish some like standards that must be taken account in order to that operation take place or not, and what moment, and also improving or empowering the participation of the kid, here or himself, in this kind of decisions, and how it must be one of the most important elements in that kind of decision. For example, we are still improving our legal system, but also we have to, like I said before, insist in their capacitation and sensibilization of the people in general in these matters.
All right, excellent. All right, we do have a question in the chat from another comrade in Oklahoma City, which is this question I think is for both of you. So whoever wants to answer first can go ahead. What are some effective tactics that we can use to educate people? How do we reach them? So Nicole or Professor Otero, whichever of you want to speak to that first.
Well, I think Nicole has a little bit more experience. I would say we need to use all the medias and the tools that we have in order to fight for these rights, to fight for these principles, not. I think, like I said before, going to that human side of the matter and give that from those family, from those individuals' perspective in how the recognition, the protection of their rights transcends to their lives itself. Why it is important, and it comes. I think it has to do a lot with that condition of dignity that in order to live plentifully, is that how you say it? You have to live under with dignity, and dignity also means living with under the possibility of taking off your being able to develop all your rights with no limitation for your characteristics, your identity, your preferences, so I think that is a very good way to focus it, from the human perspective, from the sensitive perspective, and also let's say how is harmful for you that others people's rights are protected. Okay,
There's a
there's
common saying in the United
no
States. Yeah, there's a
you
common saying that
have
we like. Sorry, I
exactly.
keep
You should
talking
have
over
to
you.
only to respect, and you have to understand why is this important to other people. That's why I say you have to go and show that is not how do you say in English, un capricho, no sé cómo lo.
A whim, a caprice. It's not just an impulsive thought.
The guarantee to live a life with dignity.
Yeah.
So I think that is a way to.
All right, Nicole, what's your answer that comes to mind for this question? Effective tactics to educate people. How do we reach them?
Yeah. So the first people you want to reach out to are the people that represent you. So for example, I live in Oklahoma City, and I am very fortunate that my state senator and state representative are incredibly progressive people who believe the things I do. However, my city councilor isn't. So that is somebody I need to reach out to. I've also found opportunities at my kids' school. For some reason, they got a wild hair to decide to divide the lunches by gender, which is great unless you're intersex or non-binary or you like the law because it's against federal law. And so I took that instead of a moment to, storm the barn and light everything on fire, though I wanted to say, hey, I know you meant well, but can I tell you why this is harmful? And if you come from a place of hopefully wanting to educate, this doesn't work on everybody. I'm not saying go do this to Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she is not going to listen. But for most legislators, for most people who are representing you, your city council member, your school board member, all of those things, they care and they want your vote. So, the other thing you can do is offer to be a resource instead of just tell people what they're doing wrong. Say, hey, I know this stuff is moving really, really fast. I know there are a lot of identities and a lot of flags. If you ever have any questions, here's my number. Let me if you struggle and you're not finding the right words and you ever want to run something by me, just, send me a text and offer to be somebody that they can lean on. They'll come to you because they'll feel comfortable. It does take a while to build those relationships, but really just start talking to people. Sometimes this is, again, don't do this unless you know what you're doing, but sometimes I like to wear gay shit to Bass Pro.
Bass Pro Shop for the non-Americans is sort of it's an outdoor shop. That's kind of where a lot of very conservative outdoorsy types like to hang out.
Right, but they see me, and it's hard to deny my identity when I'm standing right in front of you and when I'm being nice to you. And I know that takes a lot, and not everybody is able to do it every day. But if you try and come from a place of empathy and niceness, it'll get you a lot further than if you come from a place of anger, even if they did something really, really wrong and you have right to be angry.
Yeah. I think this is my editorializing, but I think, this especially applies to people who maybe have passing privilege, who can, who aren't as visibly, clocked as queer or trans or whatever. They have the ability to sort of camouflage into normal spaces but then normalize, just existing as a queer person to people who haven't ever dealt with a queer, or were unaware that they've been interacting with queer people in their lives.
And I want to preface that I do have privilege, and that I am, very straight passing, and I'm white. Let's be honest, I'm white. That gives me extreme privilege in Oklahoma. So I'm able to do things, and please don't put yourself at danger. Please don't put yourself at risk. Do what makes you most comfortable, and your safety is top priority.
Okay, Professor Otero, are you still there? Your image is frozen a little bit because I did want to ask you a question. Oh well. Let's see. Ooh, here we go. We have another question from another comrade here in Oklahoma City. The level of propaganda shared by the far right can be overwhelming. To what extent do you think it's worth it to try to create viral memes, create progressive news sources versus the type of personal connections you're discussing? So it seems like the question might be like, what can we organizationally, what it seems like this comrade is asking, what's the worth of organizationally investing resources into creating, cultural specific messaging, and whether it be social media or traditional media.
So they're very needed. Again, it's that both and approach. We need to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks as far as messaging and as far as reaching people. So I never really tell people to aspire to do something that goes viral, because that never just seems to work. But, doing things like sharing progressive stories, sharing moments of queer joy. The Tonys just happened, and a lot of people were posting a lot of pictures of people wearing fabulous gowns and dresses and looking wonderful. The more we have those imageries, the more representation we have across different platforms, it's harder to ignore us. So I think there's room for both. And I think that's part of organizing. I think sometimes people think organizing means that you have to be the person at the clipboard, or you have to be the one making the phone calls, or you have to be the one on the speech or on the stage with the megaphone. In reality, there's jobs for all of us. For example, I'm very outgoing. I will be on stage with a megaphone. My boyfriend wouldn't be caught dead. So there's room for his role that's going to be much, much more quieter. He'd probably be very good at sending text messages. So finding your niche and where you can make the most change is going to be the most impactful. Don't try and do something that's outside of your skill set or that you don't want to do and force yourself to do it. Find something you can do. When I used to do phone banks, one of the things that I really loved was having somebody just bring food. You don't have to get on the phone, but if you can bake and feed all these people on the phone, that is just as useful a skill as the people on the phones. So lean into your skill set and what you're good at, and then use that to add to your community. And there are so many different organizations. Find one that works for you. There's people that like to organize really loudly, and there's people like to organize very quietly. So find an organization that suits what you want to focus on. Offer them the skill sets that you have, and try and just advocate in those ways. And then also you won't get overwhelmed and burnt out by doing things you don't want to do.
All right, Professor Otero, we are coming up on the half hour, but I want to ask a little bit of what might be a provocative question, which is, everybody understands that the United States meddles a lot in the affairs of Cuba. And so I want to ask, with the groups that were against the family law, do you suspect, or was there ever any confirmation that there was any collaboration with, you know how like the US funds Radio Martí, which is like this, anti-communist propaganda outfit that broadcasts into Cuba, and were there a lot of what I like to call Coral Gables Cubans working to with groups against the referendum?
Yeah, like I said, I don't have the evidence to put in names or organizations that specifically work in these efforts to not approve our family law, but especially in social media, we were strongly attacked for the misinformation, the misleading, the lies that were told about what our proposal of law was putting out there. By saying, like the example I put before, very grave accusations about what we were looking for with the approval of the family law. And it's obvious that it had a political background in order to attack every effort of our government in order to feel that that status of Cuba as a social justice state. Yeah, it's like it was a clear way to attack, to destabilize. Is it the way to say it?
Destabilize.
Destabilize our system, even our democratical system, because not only they were attacking the content of the law proposal, but also the democratic system that we put in for its approval, because they were saying that it was false, that the law was going to be approved even if the majority of the Cuban people didn't vote for it. Like I said, there was a lot of false information in every social media all the time about the family law, and that made a lot more harder the communication efforts in order to put out there the real information about the family law. And of course, it had a very complex political background, and that Cuban community in the United States, at least the part of that community that it's against our political system, I think use that as an opportunity also to attack the way our government was trying, or is still trying, to reform our legal system. Even though a family code, it's not I think like no, it's not the most political expression of the law, because it's a law that has a lot more to do with the individualities of each person or on each family. But it was, of course, another opportunity to attack our democratical system and the legitimacy of our government and our legal system.
All right, thank you so much. So it is now 5:30 p.m. PST. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask the both of you if there are any final thoughts you want to leave about this topic, or anything that we have or haven't discussed yet. Nicole, I'll let you go first. Any conclusory thoughts you want to share with the people who have joined us today and will be watching the recording in the future?
As of recording day, it is Friday June 13th, and so No Kings is this weekend. And so I encourage every single person to get involved in some capacity. Again, not every role is for every person, so I understand that some folks it's not safe for you to go. Please share the posts, get the word out. If you can't go, but you would like to contribute, there's definite ways to do that, but try and get involved somehow this weekend in standing up for our immigrant brothers and sisters. And thank you so much for being here and for your time.
Excellent. Professor Otero, any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Like I said before, we can give up on the fight for human rights to understand that it is worth to fight for everybody's freedom to live their lives the fullest way they can, and under the principles and the values that they desire, especially if it is about love, it is about affection, if it is about family, we can get off in those fights. So count on me in your for those efforts. I'm here, and Angel has my email, so every time you wanna have that perspective from Cuba, and well, here I am to help. I have a message. If you give me a minute, sorry, just a second. Of Leima from the ICAP, that is the person who put me in contact with you. I think she's on the chat, but let me see. 1 second.
Hola.
Hola, Lema.
Yeah.
Lema was I believe
Yeah.
the contact with the embassy.
Yes, thank
Leima,
you.
I was trying to read your message.
Thank you. I have been following the conversation. Thank you to Professor Otero, and thank you, Angel, for putting together all these debates. Before you conclude, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you. During all these years, we have been, as Professor was mentioning, educating and struggling to improve our relationship with the different communities in our country. And it has been a long journey, but it has been a successful one. So all those laws are truly implemented in our communities, in our workplaces, and I have two things to say. One, that we have also learned from the many groups from the United States, solidarity organizations that have visited us for many years, and we have learned also from their community work. And second, thanks to all this relationship that we have with groups in the United States, we are about to launch a new initiative for 2026, and it is a love brigade. This is the family code of the love. So we are calling people to visit us next year around May from different parts of the state. We are working with some travel agencies in United States to put together a program with the experiences of the Union of Jurists in Cuba, with the university, with the National Center for Sexual Education, with the Cuban Women Federation. So all of you are invited. I will send to you, as soon as we launch the initiative, Angel, I will send you the link so you can share with all friends.
Yeah, we'll make sure to coordinate
so
with the International Committee to share that with other DSA members.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking time out of your Friday evening or afternoon to participate in this this discussion. I don't know how to speak any languages anymore. Thank you very much to Professor Otero. Thank you very much to Nicole, Ms. Poindexter for participating. Thank you very much to, again, the DSA International Committee for helping make this possible. And so if you are watching this video and want to learn a little bit more about the DSA International Committee and its solidarity campaign with Cuba, go to I have the URL right here, international.dsausa.org. Again, that's international.dsausa.org. If you are in the Oklahoma City area and you want to learn about Oklahoma City specific queer liberation efforts, you can go to okcdsa.org. Thank you all very much for coming, and look out for the recording on YouTube later.